are you doing? I'm pretty excited for today's lesson. As you all know, if you were in class on Thursday, we did this in class. This is called a swatch for your watercolors. Like, this is our first big week of getting into watercolors, and this is how you learn how your watercolors work. You learn how much paint you need versus how much water you need, and it's called watercolors because you use water. So this is the first thing we're gonna make, and I'll show you how to do it. And this is the second thing. This is your art project for the week. We didn't have a chance to get to it in class, so that is what I'm showing you today. You will be able to do this by the end of the day. It may not look this good because I've been painting for a long time, and this is honestly like my third, well, maybe my fourth or fifth like cactus painting just like this. I've painted this over and over again because it's good to practice how you do things. If it doesn't look good the first time, put it in a pile and start over again. There's no such thing as a mistake. You can dab it off. Something I don't know if I talk about a lot in this video today, but if you have too much water somewhere, just take a paper towel or a cloth and just dab it up. And that is how we fix things. So don't worry, everything can be fixed, everything can be made beautiful, and a little bit of watercolor paint goes a long way. So let's get started. All right, so this is how we're going to get started. You can see that I have a grid here. Each of my blocks is about 2 inches by 1¼ inches big. I'm starting here by wetting down the entire square and putting paint into 1/3 to 1/2 of it. And then I take water, dab off all the extra paint and some of the water, and then I just spread that color out. I'm going to repeat that through this entire thing. I also realized that I should be labeling what I'm doing because every single one of my paint colors comes with a name. Well, the name's written in Japanese, but it has a number that goes with it, so that's what I'm going to do. I label every single one of them eventually, and then I go. You are going to notice that I have skipped every other box, and that's because when your watercolor paint is wet, if you put more wet paint next to it, it will mix. And while that can be a super cool effect, you don't want to do that when you are making a swatch because you want the truest color that you can get. And that's also why it's super important in between your swatching, between every single color, to wash your paintbrush thoroughly. My favorite way to do that is I have an old honey jar and I stuck a sponge in the bottom of it. I just folded up a sponge, stuck it inside. That way, when I fill it up with water, I have something nice and squishy to wash my paintbrush against at the bottom. Now, you're also going to notice that my color numbers are not in order, and that is because I am doing them in the way that they are placed in my box. I'm kind of creating a map for my colors. That way, I have a handy reference to have next to my paints at all times. I actually hang it on the wall next to my paints, so that I always know what color I'm going to use. I do it in the exact order that they are in the box so that I know that when I am reaching for a yellow, I have sunset yellow and not mac and cheese yellow, because that can really mess up a picture if you're trying to say, draw a John Deere tractor, and you reach for green, but you choose lime green instead of your greenest green, your grass John Deere green. That can mess up your picture, if you know what I'm saying. So, you're going to want to make sure that you have things nicely labeled. And I know we did this in class on Thursday, and I know some of you did really great, and I'm so proud of you. Make sure you go back and label them. If you're not super happy with how it turned out, I'm so proud of you for doing it. But I think you could also try it again. This is like my 10th swatch page. I swatch all of my colors a lot because sometimes I forget what goes where, or I get new colors, or I want to see how certain things will go together. So never be afraid to make a lot of swatch pages. It's a great way to learn how to control your paint to water combo. You can see in some of these I have more paint spread out, and this is because I didn't wash off my paintbrush enough. And then in another one, like number 52, that green right there that I'm painting under, it has this big like water splotch, and that's because I put too much water on. So I've been painting forever, but I still make little mistakes like that. And you can see this number 63 right here. I just used way too much paint. All right, so I went ahead and sped ahead so that you guys didn't have to watch me do 36 or whatever. But I wanted to make it look nice, and I thought that by outlining it with my liners, it would look super great. Turns out it didn't look super awesome, and I kind of got bored of doing it, but it still is a great way to practice outlining your watercolors. You want to make sure you always outline your watercolors when they are dry, because otherwise you can have some bleeding issues. There are some markers that you can use while your paint is wet that won't bleed, but you could ruin the tip of your marker, and that is no fun, especially when you spent some money on them. It's not a fun thing. So you'll notice I have spaces under each one of them, and I'm just nicely outlining everything right now. Now we're moving on to the fun part, the cactuses. To start, you're going to need a nice big piece of watercolor paper. The bigger the better on this, that way you're not smushing things. You're going to want to make sure the rougher side is up. That's what you'll be painting on, that it's a little bit more textured. And you're going to put a nice strip of masking tape all around the edges, and that is for two reasons. One, to create a border, and two, to hold your paper down. And it also makes it so, I guess a third reason, it makes it so that it doesn't bend and warp, because that can kind of make things difficult later. So you're going to start by sketching out some cactuses. I do this by making my three favorite cactuses. The first one is just a big bump, just one of the basic green ones. The next one is a pear cactus, and it has the little growths on it. You don't have to do this, but I have learned after lots of trial of error to kind of layer them in the front and the back of the cactus. You'll see how I mess with the dimensions there. Don't feel like you have to do that. Just draw a couple cactuses. If you want to do all of the first kind, do it. If you want to do all of the tall ones with the arms that I'm doing right now, do that kind. But you need to draw 3 cactuses, either all the same, all different, some of each kind, doesn't matter. The reason I choose cactuses is because they can be very whimsical, and it's okay if they don't look exactly right, because I don't know if you've ever seen a cactus, but they all look exactly different. Every single one of them looks completely different. There's not a single one that's the same. So the reason I do it like that is, well, because they're different, and that way if you make a mistake, it's a little bit easier. Now you'll see with the first cactus, we're just going to do this basic green cactus. You start by making the cactus part all wet. Make it pretty wet. You go around the outside edge first to kind of create a barrier, and then you fill it in with more water. And then I'm taking my grassiest green color with a very wet paintbrush and just slopping it all over. You notice that on the left side I made it a little bit darker, and then I just flooded the rest of the cactus that I've already made wet with even more water. And you just spread out the paint like you like it. I like darker on one side and lighter on the other, and then you leave it. You just leave it there. I add a little bit of a different color dark paint just to make the bottom have a little bit more dimension. I spread it out, and you could see right in the middle of that cactus there how I'm leaving a water line so that it will bleed in, and you'll have this cool like a starburst effect with how the water spreads into the green part of the cactus. Now this next one I'm doing a galaxy style, but I'm doing it this way with a galaxy because it is a cool color combo. Cold colors remind you of ice, so blue and purple, and also green. I don't know why it's a cool color. I'm sure there's a reason, but it is on the cool spectrum, and I like playing with the color combos. So to do this one, I had a really wet brush with paint, and I'm spreading it around. I did not pre-wet my cactus. I just have lots of paint on my paintbrush. Way too much paint, actually. I realized later that I made it way too dark, but that's okay. So I'm going around the edges because I want to add a cool turquoise color in. So I'm making this little line. You can do however you want it. I like doing it this way. And then I take a very wet blue paint, super wet, and I put it right up next to it. And then when I get it where I like it, I spread it around. But I also make sure I clean off my paintbrush really, really well in between the colors here so that I don't have any weird, like just a weird purple color everywhere. I want to make sure you can still see the blue. So that's what's happening here. I'm adding the purple and the blue and kind of mushing them together. I'm not smearing, I'm just kind of pushing. You can see that I just kind of dab my paintbrush in the middle there. That's what I do. And now I'm going to start adding a lot of water on top of my paint. It is going to move my paint around a little bit, but it's going to make this next technique really cool. I get a lot of blue paint onto my paintbrush and I splash it around. You do this by just tapping the end of your brush, tap, 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 and it will kind of splatter the paint and make it have these cool little like pools of blue. I really love it when that happens. It bleeds together. I don't touch the blue paint again. I just leave it and let it bleed however it wants. Let the water do its thing. Now this next one, I'm using a lot of paint and not a lot of water. So I have to go back in for a lot more paint the whole time. I'm doing a really, really thick layer of paint. And these I'm going to be doing warm colors, which is orange, pink, and yellow and red. So the bottom I'm doing a nice thick dark pink, and I'm doing a lighter pink on the top. And you can see I actually had to go back in for more paint right there. And I'm leaving a little teeny bit of a line so that I can, oh, there it goes. I just fill it in with some water to kind of make them bleed. And then next, I'm actually going to do orange on the branches of this cactus because I think it'll be kind of cool, kind of psychedelic. And it's a really thick paint again. Remember, I didn't put any water in on the paper to begin with. I just made my paintbrush really covered in wet paint. And I make them bleed together right there again. Now don't worry if you don't get this right away. This project actually took me about 4 hours. It takes a long time when you're trying hard. Being fast does not mean you are the best. It just means that you're getting done fast. It takes a long time to make things look really good. Right here I'm struggling with blending the pink and the orange, so I just keep adding the colors together until I like the way it looks. It's trial and error. If I wanted, I could dab some of the color away and start over. But do you see how that green one right there, how it bled, and it's actually dry now. So I'm taking a dark green paint with a very fine tip paintbrush, and I am going over and drawing little lines because a lot of cactuses have little lines like that. That I put them in. I just drew a little cylinder, made it look like a little cup, and then I'm adding a stucco color. Stucco is a type of clay, and that's the color I wanted on this one. You'll see that in a lot of pottery, any type of pot, like a plain basic pottery color. That's what I'm doing here. I actually have this color in my palette already, but you can get it by mixing red and orange with some brown. And then I added some dark brown at the bottom to make it look like it had some dirt on it. This next pot is going to be all black. Just a basic black pot because it's galaxy, so, you know, it's got to be in outer space. Next, oh yeah, I'm going over, make sure it's really black. The blackest of blacks. Now, for this next one, it's really fun. I didn't quite get all my black paint off, but I got most of it off. I'm soaking my entire pot with water. Super, super wet. And then I'm using super wet paint to kind of drag through. And then I did it with yellow and orange, just dragged it all in because I really like the way this looks. Do a little bit more right here. Drag all that wet paint in. Oh, this is going to be so cool. And I kind of spread it out a little bit and add a little bit of a darker color for some depth. But you notice how I'm only using two colors that are very similar. Yellow and orange are right next to each other in the rainbow in a color wheel. And they actually, yellow is in orange. So I'm making them so they go together and they blend really well. They're in the same color family. So that way it doesn't get all muddy. All right, now we let that dry a little bit. And my brown pot should be done pretty soon. But while I wait for it to dry, I'm going to add some yellow highlights. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these cactuses, but they typically have ridges. And I'm kind of making some fun, fancy ridges with a wet yellow paint. So this is what happens when you put a wet yellow paint on top of your mostly dry cactus. So when it's dry, you can add highlights to it, but you don't want to do that until it's dry. I'm cleaning up the edge here because I kind of messed up and got out of the lines, so gotta fix it. Gotta make it look like I did it on purpose. That's fine. Okay, now I am going to mix some paint here. Some orange and some yellow and some brown. I'm making dirt, guys. Your cactus has to live in some dirt in the pot. So I just made a fun color. You saw how I did that there. Made a dirt color, sand color, because they kind of live in sand. There you go. Add it in around the edges. Next, I'm going to add detailing on my pottery. You could leave your pottery just like this, but I like a decorated pot. I think they're pretty cute. So I'm using my white paint. The key to using white watercolor paint is to use get your brush really wet, get the paint really wet and thick, and use it. And you have to use small little strokes with your white paint, because otherwise it'll just kind of disappear. Got to make it really thick. Adding a little bit more color into the yellow. You'll see that I have smudges all over my paper, and you know what? That's just how it's happening. I don't care. It's a smudge. It adds character. So this next one, I'm actually going to be adding some silver into my galaxy pot. Yeah, I added silver on one side, and I added a little too much, so I'm just putting black back on the other side. Oh, there's more silver. There we go. Silver paint. I love this pot. I love it. I think it's so cool. And I'm going to add white stars. Okay, they're not stars. I mean, they look like stars, but they're actually the pricks on the cactus. The cactus pricklies from the prickly pears on the cactus. So add all those little cactus quills. I don't know, what do you call a cactus prick? And stick them in there. Again, I'm doing this with very thick white watercolor paint. If you're having trouble with your white watercolor paint, you could use a white gel pen or a little bit of white acrylic paint. That's what I did before I had good white watercolor. I just used acrylic paint. And now some stripes, because why not? I think it's fun. More dots. Dots for days, guys. So many little dots. I know it seems like a lot of work to put dots on stuff, but it just makes it look so much cooler. You could do it randomly, but I found that I kind of like having a pattern and a purpose. Here I'm doing little flowers, which are just tiny little lines all stuck together with a dot in the middle. And that's how I'm decorating this pot. I'm telling you, it's all psychedelic. Very cool. Dots. Okay, there. The pot is done. Now, on to the next thing. What should I do? Yes, yellow and white. Oh man, yellow and white. So I'm making a soft yellow, because anytime you add white to a color, it gets a little softer, and I am splattering it on. So the way you do this is just like we did the blue in the galaxy one, but you get a lot of paint on your watery paint, and you see how I'm flicking the end of the brush right there. Just flick, flick, flick. You tap, 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 tap the end of the brush, and it adds little dots all over. So that's how I'm doing my pricklies, my cactus pricklies for that. And now I'm taking a chunky black liner marker, and I'm outlining all of my pots, and I'm also going to be outlining the cactuses. I can draw a straight line, but it's easier for me if I do lines a little bit at a time so that it doesn't look silly. I'm also outlining the lines that I put on the green cactus, and I'm also adding little cactus hairs. Is that what you call them? I don't know, but I'm putting little cactus hairs on every single dot. I'm also going to add more little black dots with my marker. But that gives it that texture that you're looking for to make it look like a cactus. Now, when you outline the pot, you'll see on the next ones, you want to make sure you outline the soil, the dirt also, so that way you can see the lip in the back of the pot. There we go, right there, that's what I did. And now I go along the edges, and I actually make an extra lip on that one to make it kind of look like it's rounded on top. Just outlined. All right. And yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, I added some black dots all over it. Because, you know, you can't just have white dots. You got to have black dots too. So I took a thick black marker and I added little dots all over the place. Just for an extra. And I actually tried making most of them sit right on top or right next to a white dot. So it kind of looks like a shadow. I know this is going really fast, guys. Again, this took me 4 hours. So don't feel bad when it takes you a long time. I do not expect you to finish in the time of you watching this video. You'd have to be like Sonic the Hedgehog. There's no possible way to get it done while you're watching the video. And no, that's not a challenge. Okay, so next I decided I wanted some white stars. So I took my favorite white gel pen and I am adding little white stars, and I didn't think it was like bright enough. So I'm taking my white Posca pen, and a Posca pen is a white acrylic paint pen. They're kind of expensive, so you don't need to get them, but they're my favorite thing to have. And I'm actually outlining this whole pot and cactus in white, and I added dots and stars with my white. So yeah, that's how I did that. It also cleans up the edges because I found that my technique for this one was a little bit messy. So I used my paint to make the edges clean. You could do that with white acrylic paint too, because that's basically all I have in this pen is white acrylic paint. There you go. There we have it. Gosh, I love this artwork so much. Okay, so now for the background. Backgrounds are super fun. You got to make sure you do it last, and you have to make sure everything is dry. I have a preferred method to do backgrounds. I like mine to be really washed out, so I put water on the entire section I'm working on, and I like to use an edge brush so that I can just put paint right up next to the edges, but it's all already wet. I wetted down this whole section that I'm doing so that I can make it kind of look like a sky, like it's not just one layer. It's kind of splotchy. I really like splotchy watercolor backgrounds. That's my style. Maybe you don't like watercolors to look splotchy and you want it to look nice and clean and neat. That's fine too. So here I'm working in sections. I did the pink section first, and now I'm going over to the green area. And I'm making that all wet. You see how it's all just water that I'm putting down. And I am not touching the cactuses. I am staying a little bit away from the cactuses because I had learned the hard way. If you get too close, your watercolors, even if they're dry, when you make something that wet, they will bleed and get mushy. And I don't like mushy, bleedy watercolors. So here I am just adding in some watercolors, and I'm doing it really lightly because I can always add more later, but it's harder to take it away. So just adding in some paint, and I am making sure it's all real wet. And you'll see I'm using a big flat brush here, and that is so that I can get really clean edges. I have a whole set of really flat, pointy brushes so that I can make sure I always have a clean edge to work with. There we go. All right. I'm going to just touch up some places that I think need more. In this case, when I first started doing this technique for backgrounds, I kept a paper towel, or you'll see next to me my flour sack cloth. I use that to just dab up a bunch of areas when I was first learning how to do this because I could not get the water control down correctly right away. So I would just dab water up as I was going until I liked the way it looked. But now I kind of know what I'm doing. All right. Okay, now the painting's done. Remove the tape when it's dry and sign your name. And you're good to go. Just be careful so you don't peel the paint. that was today's lesson, guys. Aren't you glad you got to make this? I'm excited for you that you got to make this. I will see you all in class on Thursday. And don't forget to keep drawing in your sketchbooks. I want you to keep drawing things that you see like 3 times a week. That is going to be fabulous. Okay. Bye, guys. See you on Thursday.